Hey guys, this is John from US Dash Camera. Today got a real big review on the new Viofo A119 V3. Now, while they call this the V3 or the version 3, there are actually quite a lot of different versions of the A119 models, so we're going to talk about that in this video and compare them. But first I'd like to thank OCD Tronic for sending this review unit out. They are the exclusive dealer on this A119 V3 on Amazon currently. Check them out. I'll provide links down in the description, of course, if you are interested in buying it. And OCD Tronic is very active on dashcamtalk.com on their forums, so if you do have any questions, that's always a great resource too. So like I said, while this is called the V3, there are actually more than 3 A119 models. But what this one has over previous ones is pretty big. I feel like this is the biggest improvement on any of the A119 models. Now last year's model, the Pro, which I still have right here, this is the A119 Pro. Both of them have 5 megapixel sensors, but this one does have a 5 megapixel Sony IMX355 image sensor, which provides Quad HD+. Quad HD is 1440p, and this one is 1600p, but it's not 16:9. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Now, the other really big improvement in this model is it finally has pre-buffered parking mode, and that's something that I've been wanting to see in companies outside of South Korea for a long time, so we'll talk quite a bit about that later. And one feature that a lot of people have been asking for is the parking mode hardwiring kit actually does work through the GPS mount. So before we get too much into this, let's break down the differences between all the different models. So now the original A119 came out several years ago, and at the time it was a really great camera. It still is pretty good. It included the Novatech 96660 chipset, and then it had an OmniVision OV4689 image sensor that gave it pretty great 1440p. Now, one unique thing is it does have this swivel lens and lets you swivel it left or right, but I don't think most people even used it. And other than the V2 model, all of the other different models did not include this because of the lens size was too big to fit a swivel lens. And one thing about the original, or the V2, is there was a basic parking mode, but it's not going to be nearly as advanced as what we have here in the V3. One major issue the original model had was with the GPS mount. It had these little pogo pins, and these would break or cause connection issues, and it resulted in a lot of people having to return their A119s. Now, shortly after the release of the original one, they did release the A119S, which was pretty similar. It had the same Novatech chipset, but it used a 2 megapixel Sony image sensor. Now, the OmniVision sensor in the original was a 4 megapixel sensor, so the A119S could only do 1080p, but it did do 60 frames per second, and at the time I reviewed it, I did think it had better low light capabilities. Now, there was also an A119S V2, which basically got the same updates, better manufacturing, better GPS mount as the regular version V2. So now, coming back to the A119 Pro, I thought this was a really good upgrade. Some preferred the V2, but from my experience, even today when I updated the firmware, it seems like the Pro does have a better video quality, and it uses an Aptima 5 megapixel image sensor. It does still use the same Novatech 96660 chipset. One unique thing about this model is it did come with a suction cup mount. None of the other cameras came with it. It was always optional. Now, coming to the A119 V3. Now, as I said, it does use the 5 megapixel Sony IMX355 image sensor, which is pretty new for dash cameras. It has great video quality and does up to 1600p, but as you can see here, 1600p mode is not a 16:9 aspect ratio. It's just a taller version of the 1440p of Quad HD. And from what I've seen on Dashcam Talk, 1440p with the newest 1.02 firmware update gives you the best video quality and in the high bitrate option, it gives you 30 megabits per second, which is pretty huge. The new chipset in this model is the Novatec 96670, which is what's allowing this version to include that automatic pre-buffered parking mode. This new model also officially supports up to 256 gigabyte memory cards. Now, I personally recommend Samsung cards. The new Pro Endurance cards are especially what I like to recommend, but they do currently only go up to 128 gigabytes. If you do want a 256 gigabyte card, check out Samsung's Evo card lineup. And it's going to come with several different mounting options. We got two mounting plates that don't have GPS. One is slightly thicker than the other, which can help with certain windshields. Maybe your windshield isn't as steep or is too steep. So, that's why they give you these two different options. And then, of course, we got the GPS mount. And you can see on the mount, it actually says V3. So this is an updated version from the V2 and the original that had the pogo pins. So you can see they did round the pins out a little bit. Definitely noticeable that they're rounder than the V2. But also, as I said before, this GPS mount does support using the hardwiring cable through that. So you don't have to plug in hardwiring cable into the side of the camera anymore. So that's really awesome that they finally updated that. Now, what I really like about Viofo these days is they do include these really easy pull tabs on their adhesives that make installation much easier if you need to put a new adhesive on. Now, as I said before, the suction cup mount only came with a Pro model for whatever reason, but of course you can buy this optionally, and it does work with the V3 model. This gives people an option to take the camera out and maybe put it in a rental car or in a friend's car on a road trip, so it's definitely worth checking out. Of course, we do also have the CPL option, and if you aren't aware of what a CPL filter does, it does reduce some of the glare or reflection in the windshields. It can sometimes provide better color and just in general a better picture, so I do recommend it. Now, we got the 3-wire hardwire kit, which OCD-tronic also sent out, and in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through how to hardwire it, but I will provide a link down in the description to a good guide about hardwiring, so check that out if you're curious on how to do that. Also included are these foam adhesives that you can place on the camera. It goes between the camera and the mount. Basically, it just gives it a tighter fit, and I do recommend using these. These have come with them for a while, and I just never really went into detail with these. Now, when talking about the video quality, like I mentioned earlier, it does have 1600p, but since that's a taller image, not 16:9, I didn't really see the benefit of that. I don't need more dashboard and more sky in my video, and the general consensus, as I said on Dashcam Talk, is that the 30 megabit per second 1440p mode is actually the best mode to choose for if you want best video quality. So for the rest of this video, I am just going to be using the 1440p mode. Overall, I was very, very impressed with the video quality in this camera. Now, I did compare this side by side with the V2, the Pro, and the A129. Now, I do have to say that I included the A129 because I had it, but it's not really a fair comparison because of the placement of the cameras. For one, the three A119s were on the left side of my car, and the A129 was on the far right side, and that might have messed with the image a little bit, especially at night. But also, when I rendered the footage, the A129 is only 1080p, and it got upscaled basically to fit the screen of the 1440p video I was rendering, so it wasn't native 1080p, but I just wanted to include it because I did have it. The screenshots I do show comparing them will be from the native image though. So overall, when it comes to the day quality, I was very surprised that the A119 V3 actually did seem like a pretty decent leap. You can see a lot more detail in a lot of the surrounding environment, and when I was driving by a car at about 30 miles per hour and I captured the license plate as about the exact same time with all four cameras, it was very noticeable how the V3 was crystal clear compared to the others. Overall, for just a little bit more, the V3 definitely is a killer purchase right now. Now, when it comes to the night footage, since this uses a Sony image sensor, it does have very great low light quality. The Sony image sensors typically have been better at night quality, so that's why the A119S was preferred by some people who wanted better low light conditions. And you'll see here in this comparison how the A129, which uses a Sony IMX291 image sensor, also has better video quality than the two that use the Omnivision or Optima image sensor. So those two look really dark, where both the Sony image sensor ones look much brighter and much clearer. Now I do have to point out that there was this one instance where it seemed like the A129 might have been a little better than the A119 V3, where it seemed like some of the fast motion and this license plate of this truck came up clear on the A129. It could possibly be because of the location of the A129. My truck's headlights are pretty high up, and they often shine directly into people's license plates, so I thought maybe it's possible that the V3 being quite a bit further to the left on my windshield, maybe it was getting more reflection, but also it could just be the fact that the A129 was recording in 60 frames per second, so maybe it was able to capture detail without as much motion blur. In other instances, it did seem like the V3 was better than the A129. My overall opinion on the video quality was, while there was some back and forth with the A129 at night, the V3, in my opinion, is hands down the one to go with if you're looking for the best video quality. Now with the parking mode, this is one of the biggest updates of this model, and that's the automatic pre-buffered parking mode. So what that means is when your car shuts off, the camera is going to go into standby, but it's pre-buffering 10 seconds of video on its own internal memory. I counted about 12 seconds in my samples, but if it senses motion or an impact, it saves that 10 or 12 seconds leading up to that trigger, plus an additional 10 seconds or more onto your memory card. Now one issue with this mode is if you park somewhere with a lot of traffic, you're going to constantly be recording, and that's going to fill up your memory card quickly. Now this mode uses only 8 megabits per second, so it's not using the full 30 megabits per second of normal recording, but it can still be quite a burden on your memory card if you're just recording 8+ hours a day while you're parked at work. This is normally a feature only found in high-end Korean dash cameras like from Blackview and Thinkware, so I'm very excited to see this in a Viofo product. Now the second parking mode is time-lapse. So what time-lapse does is you get 1 or 2 frames per second, or there's several different options more than that, like 3 or 5 seconds or frames per second. And the benefit of this is you can save many more hours of footage without wasting as much memory card space as the other or the main parking mode feature. But of course you are getting lower frame rates, so you might not capture an incident as well. So it's something to consider if you park in an area that has constant traffic and you don't want to fill your memory card up every day. One other option is the low bitrate mode. This is similar to time-lapse in the fact that it basically allows you to save more footage on your memory card. It uses a little less than 4 megabits per second instead of 8 from the automatic parking mode. The fact that there's no timer functionality built into the parking mode is a con for me. I don't want my camera to just be recording until it senses the 12 volts of my battery and cuts off, because basically that's going to reduce the lifespan of your car battery if you're constantly draining it down to 12 volts. Now one thing I did test was using bad memory cards. In the past I knew that these A119s were supposed to be able to detect if your memory card needed to be formatted. Now I tried this in the V2, the Pro, and the A119S. Now 2 of my memory cards are definitely bad. It doesn't record, nothing can record to it. It can't be opened on my PC, but for whatever reason all of the cameras think they're recording to it. So that's a little concerning, but when I tried the third bad card I have, the V2 and the Pro did say it needed to be formatted, but it didn't really make any beeping noises or anything. The A129 did say there was an issue and it did beep, but what I liked about the V3 is it actually says memory error and it does beep until you do something about it. So guys, in conclusion, this camera I think is going to be a huge hit. It's probably going to be a big seller for Viofo, It's got excellent video quality, a real big jump over the very popular V2. The fact that it has pre-buffered automatic parking mode is such a huge plus, especially at only $120. That's a killer deal for a camera that cheap to have pre-buffered parking mode. And also the fact that parking mode works through the GPS, the fact that they've been adding all these other great features makes me very confident and excited for the future of Viofo. But for now, this is definitely a killer deal, and if you guys are looking for an upgrade, a very affordable upgrade, definitely check this model out. And like I said before, I'll provide links down in the description to where you can purchase this. Check that down below. Of course, if you enjoy this video or my other videos, I'd appreciate it if you hit like and subscribe. And as usual, drive safe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.